Welkom terug by die Groot Ontbyt. Ons gesels vanmôre met Shandor Larenty. Nou, hy is 'n sosiale media ontploffing. Kan jy vertel? Hy's 'n wildslewe-gedragskenner en dan hierdie beroemdheid op sosiale media verwerf met sy video's oor leeu's en ander diere en dies meer. En hy doen nogal heelwat vir bewaring in ons land. Ons gesels môre 'n bietjie met hom en vind uit oor sy lewe en sy wêreld. Good morning, Shandor.
Good morning. Thank you guys so much for having me in studio today.
It's lovely having you in studio, Shandor. I mean, I just want to talk about the 9 million followers on TikTok. 9 million.
Just a few.
That is a lot of followers. I mean, to have that amount of people following on social media, you definitely have to focus on content, focus on the design of content, but I mean also the entertainment value and then the conservation value of it. How do you manage to balance the entertainment and the conservation in your social media feeds?
So that's exactly it. It's very much a balance. I think one thing about social media and platforms like TikTok is people value authenticity. So it really is just about being yourself, being who you are. It's very difficult to fake something on video. So I think that's what people appreciate about that platform. But in saying that, with having such a big platform, you want to use it for the best possible reasons you can. And I think, in a sense, that's what I try and do, is create that passion, instill that love for wildlife, bring to light a lot of the issues that our wildlife faces on a daily basis, and then issues like climate change and so on, which I cover quite frequently on my page.
These are issues that you will obviously understand and other people might not. So it's wonderful that you have such a passion for the wildlife and want to bring it to light. But where did this passion for wildlife start with you?
So this is definitely something that runs in my blood. So my dad is actually an animal behaviorist, as was his mother. So I'm actually the third generation to kind of continue, doing this line of work. So at no point growing up was I never not around wildlife, which, I've been very fortunate to have an amazing life in that sense.
And what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned? I mean, like you say, 3 generations down the line, then your insights there's proper insights, obviously.
Most definitely. So, a lot of the knowledge has been passed down over the generations. And I can honestly say, sitting here today, that if it wasn't for my father and my grandmother, I most likely wouldn't have a lot of the knowledge that, I use on a daily basis working with this wildlife. And I think growing up, my dad was very much insistent that when I started volunteering at around the age of 12, I wasn't allowed to work with the animals. I had to do all the nasty stuff, not nasty stuff, but the dirty work, cleaning and prepping food and stuff like that. And it was the lesson that you need to learn to look after these animals before you have the privilege of being able to have a relationship with them.
You mentioned your dad and grandparents being animal behavioralist and how important it is to understand the behavior of the animals and follow your instinct. How important is it to follow your instinct in critical situations? I mean, none of those photos were critical situations, I don't think. But I mean, to me, that would be critical, having to get that close to wild animals. And surely some instinct needs to be kicked in and really important there.
Most definitely. So one thing I can say is I'm very blessed at the Lion and Safari Park to have an incredible animal family. But again, just taking the lions as an example, people think all lions are the same, but they've all got such individual, unique personalities. And building those relationships, it takes many, many years. But it's understanding the individual animal, their likes, their dislikes, and they let you know when they're not happy, and it's about understanding those boundaries they set in place and respecting those boundaries.
Talking about relationships with these animals, one of them, George. Tell us more about George, and I believe at some stage I read he saved your life.
Yes, that is right. So George is a very special lion. The park is home to many lions, but it's a handful of characters that I have these kind of bonds with. But George had, so he accidentally had 2 cubs. Contraception wasn't foolproof, and the lioness did fall pregnant, and she ended up having 2 cubs. So the two cubs growing up in the pride, they were fairly comfortable with me being around. But young male lions at around the age of 2 start getting ousted from the pride because that's when they start reaching maturity, and they'll start to fight with the current male of the pride. And he was at that stage, and the wilder ones, they do this growl when they want a treat or they want a snack, and that day it wasn't one of those growls, and I was very far away from a vehicle because they're in very big open areas, and I was like, this is it. My mentality has always been, you know, pride instinct kicks in. We attach human emotion to animal behavior. So I never ever thought that it would be the case. But when that male started coming for me, from the side, the lioness came and grabbed him, and George came running from behind me, knocked me to the side and grabbed him from the front, and it gave me enough time to get to the vehicle.
Wow.
So after that, I had a new level of respect, you know, to the relationship that we have.
So here's the thing, I think, and this would be a great example of that. I think many people will think, okay, but animals, they remain animals. And so we often hear these stories about people that grew up with whatever animal it is, and then the animal killed them at some stage. Not the animal's fault, because we also move into their spaces. What is that line? How do we find that line to realize, well, it remains a wild animal and I'm still going into their space?
100%. So, like I was saying, you know, the relationships that I have with the animals is developed over, it's my 18th year working with them. So, you know, it's been a long time. But in doing so, you really need to respect the boundaries that they put in place. So they tell you when they're not having a good day. It's like people, you know, we've got good days, bad days. And I'll never ever walk up to the animals. I always let them come to me. And it's the easiest way for them to say, hey, today I'm not having a good day. And, you know,
Wow.
you just need to respect that, not push those boundaries, because when you push those boundaries, it can be life-threatening. But in saying that as well, you know, I never recommend people trying to interact with wild animals at the same time.
No, because ideally you'd like to keep them as wild as possible, because there's always the sustainable view going ahead. There's always you always keep the future in mind. You always have to think about possible release and rehabilitation. But you do release and rehabilitation. You think about Sky, for instance, raising Sky. Tell us more about that story.
So Sky is a giraffe. She was an orphan that was brought into the park, and she grew up at the Lion and Safari Park. And we've had, you know, many stories similar to Sky's. But Sky theoretically should never have survived the first week. I think that was one of the most stressful weeks of my life. Her body was shutting down when she arrived at the park. So she was basically on critical life support for a week, and our amazing team, our dedicated vets we literally worked around the clock. And what was amazing is the day that we decided this is actually so traumatic for her at this point, her chance of survival is very low. It was like someone turned the light switch on and she started drinking by herself.
Wow.
And she thrived. And Sky was eventually released back into the reserve. So it's always such a special moment for me, because you put in so much effort for such a long time, and getting to see them integrate back with the wild giraffe, join up with the herds, and still having those moments where, you know, they leave their new wild family to come say hello to you is always very special.
Like you said earlier, it's important not to attach human emotion to pride or pack dynamics.
100%. And I think, you know, we underestimate how tough life in the wild actually is. And, you know, we have stories like The Lion King and so on that creates a very human-orientated perception on their behavior. And the reality is actually quite different to that.
If you could leave people with one message regarding conservation or wildlife, what would it be?
So I think one message, as South Africans, we're blessed with such incredible natural heritage. We have amazing wildlife in our country, and problems that they face on a daily basis. You know, as our human population grows, their homes, their habitat is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think it's something that we need to consciously keep in mind as, you know, as we keep going on. So our kids in 50, 60 years can enjoy the same wildlife that we have today. I think making a change today gives them a better future.
Absolutely, and it's necessary for all of us. Sometimes a bit more urgent than we think and realize to
Most
make that
definitely.
choice today. Thank you so much, Shandor, for being here this morning and telling us about your lovely, lovely story. I mean, TikTok, 9 million followers. Gaan maak 'n draai op TikTok. Volg die man, Shandor Larenty op TikTok en kyk 'n bietjie wat maak hy. Dit is nogal baie oulik om te sien. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.